This being the week that we are celebrating Earth Week, and our theme for the week being our role as human beings on Earth. The poem is called Earthrise by Amanda Gorman.
On Christmas Eve, 1968, astronaut Bill Anders snapped a photo of the Earth as Apollo 8 orbited the moon. Those three guys were surprised to see from their eyes a planet looked like an Earthrise, a blue orb hovering over the moon's gray horizon with deep oceans and silver skies. It was our world's first glance at itself, a first chance to see a shared reality, a declared stance, and a commonality, a glimpse into our planet's mirror. And as threats drew nearer, our own urgency became clearer as we realized that we hold nothing dearer than this floating body we all call home. We've known that we're caught in the throes of climactic changes. Some say will just go away, while some simply pray to survive another day. For it is the obscure, the oppressed, the poor who, when the disaster is declared done, still suffer more than anyone. Climate change is the single greatest challenge of our time. Of this, you're certainly aware. It's saddening, but I cannot spare you from knowing an inconvenient fact, because it's getting the facts straight that gets us to act and not to wait. So I tell you this not to scare you, but to prepare you, to dare you to dream a different reality where, despite disparities, we all care to protect this world, this riddled blue marvel, this little true marvel, to master the verve and the nerve to see how we can serve our planet. You don't need to be a politician to make it your mission to conserve, to protect, to preserve that one and only home that is ours. To use your unique power to give next generations the planet they deserve. We are demonstrating, creating, advocating. We heed this inconvenient truth because we need to be anything but lenient with the future of our youth. And while this is a training in sustaining the future of our planet, there is no rehearsal. The time is now, because the reversal of harm and protection of a future so universal should be anything controversial. So, Earth, pale blue dots, we will fail you not. Just as we chose to go to the moon, we know it's never too soon to choose hope. We choose to do more than cope with climate change. We choose to end it. We refuse to lose. We do this and more, not because it's very easy or nice, but because it is necessary. Because with every dawn, we carry the weight of the fates of this celestial body orbiting a star. And as heavy as the weight sounded, it doesn't hold us down, but it keeps us grounded, steady, ready, because an environmental movement of this size is simply another form of an Earthrise. To see it, close your eyes, visualize that all of us in this room and outside of these walls or in these halls, all of us change makers, or in a spacecraft floating like a silver raft in space, and we see the face of a planet anew. We relish the view, we witness its round green and brilliant blue, which inspires us to ask deeply, wholly, what can we do? Open your eyes, know the future of this wise planet is right in sight, right in all of us. Trust this earth uprising. All of us bring light to exciting solutions never tried before, for it is our hope that implores us at our uncompromising core to keep rising up for an earth more than worth fighting for.
Isn't she magnificent? Yeah. So I'd like to introduce another magnificent young woman, Miku Lenentine. Miku has been the grateful recipient of teachings from traditions from both North and South America, as well as Northern Europe through the Celtic peoples. And she's additionally studied some of the traditions of the East, such as the yogic traditions. So she's a really wonderful proponent of taking a global view and to look at our role on Earth as human beings. What should we be doing? And who demonstrates a wise way of acting? I know that she speaks to us from a very, very humble position. So I'm going to let Miku explain that to you. Miku?
Thank you, Renee, and welcome everyone. So good to see you all. Well, I just wanted to share that today I'll be speaking about traditions that I've been so blessed to receive, but also in speaking from or about or with a tradition, a lineage that I've been welcomed into, I wanted to make sure that it wasn't just me speaking. And so there'll be a little bit of multimedia shares today so that you can really hear the voice coming through the teacher who taught me. And his name is Oseam Chokutan Wagner, or Paul Wagner. Oseam is his honoring name, and Chokutan is his spiritual name or his given name. And there's a whole story there, but we'll wait on that. There might be lots of stories and teasers. But I wanted to share, many of you have seen me play my flute at Still and Moving Center and various meditations or offerings. And he's the one that is teaching me flute, but to learn flute, it means to learn a whole way of being and living and seeing in the world. And so today I wanted to share some curated clips that I have of different talks that he gave. And I did invite him to attend today. It was a bit of a last minute invitation. So I think he's actually off in the woods somewhere doing his work. And but he did say, yes, please share these videos and recordings are made to share. And I have another friend, a Kaleo 10 that maybe some of you know, and I checked with him, and guess where he is? He's off in the woods in the forest doing his work there. And I made my way up into the mountains this morning also to make sure that I kind of got my time in there. And there's a funny irony, I guess, of like the people that really are holding these teachings are a little hard to get hold of because they're off in the forest doing their work. So yeah, so I guess I'd like to just share those with you. And Renee, did you want to speak on the Theosophic tradition part of this, or at the end, or how?
At some point. Please go ahead.
So then I wanted to do a little bit, I think I often would do a traditional welcome if I was speaking from a First Peoples place or from that tradition, but I'm gonna let him do that in the clip I have for you. Before we begin, what one would normally do is make space for anyone who is joining us today, who comes from a tradition, a place-based Indigenous tradition especially, to share, if you'd like, to share your name and where you're from if you have a tradition. So I wanted to create a space for that first, before we have Chokutan greet us. So just opening the floor for anyone who feels called to just share if they're of a tradition. Okay. So I just wanted to make that space. And for those who are there who are not wanting to, or for those all around the world, really, I just want to raise my hands to First People, stewards of the planet, and just say, thank you so much gratitude for the First People who came into the first relationship with Mama Gaia, with the earth, and learned how to be a human being and what their role was. So thank you so much for all of you who are present here and for all of you there. So I'll leave it at that and then just go ahead and share for you.
Isan Tachel Swahela. Good to see everybody. Tia Squecho, Tia Cochil this morning. So good to see everybody. And we can welcome each other here if you want to try some old sign language. It feels pretty good. Yeah, it's a good warm-up too. This means welcome in our language, and it means thank you. And it means I share my heart with you. And keep your hands up like that. Yeah. And it means I lift you up like this, because we learned it from the cedar tree. The cedar tree is our mother tree. And that's where we learned many things: to be thankful, to be compassionate, to even be compassionate for water. That's right. And to thank the water, to speak to the water. And so this is kind of like Native American yoga. We're doing our little our yoga warm-ups. Thank you. Hi, Chikasiyam. Welcome each other here. And so it's a beautiful day. Every day is a beautiful day. We have a chance to share. We have a chance to lift each other up spiritually, to help each other. And I thank the Spirit that we could come here today and we can do this work and share with each other and hear the words of people who live with our Mother Earth, who are concerned about the waters of our Mother Earth and all the sacred things that she has for us. And I'm going to go ahead and just begin with a song. And if you could help out with this song, I'd appreciate that. And we'll clap our hands. If you could clap your hands like this. It's just more gentle. It's the way that we clap our hands in the Coast Salish territory. And so anyway, I'm from Saanich. Can you say that word? That's the real name of our homeland. Saanich. Oh, but you got to say the breath first, like you're going to blow out a candle. Can you go just like that? Saanich. Yeah, because our language has breath in it, has water sounds, and that's one of the sounds in our native language. But so please clap your hands, sing along, however it comes out. We'll welcome. We want to welcome our ancestors to come here and help us today. Because it's not just me, it's not just any one person here. It's not about ourselves. It's about our connection to everything, about our connection to the mountains and the sacredness of those rocks, and our connection to the water and the sacredness of that cleansing element, and our connection to each other and where we came from. I believe we should always honor that. So please help with this song. I'm going to sing a medicine song from our Saanich people. But just clap your hands, join in. That's why we came here. One of the reasons why we came here. I think we came here to come together too as people, because our world is a different place for us Native people especially. It's a different world that we live in today, you know, because my mom was born in the longhouse. Her name is Saseeta. Can you say Saseeta? That's her traditional name. She was born right there in Saanich, and the first language on her tongue was our Sanchothan language. She didn't know any other language. That's what she spoke. She was born in the longhouse. In those days, the people lived in the longhouse, and there's earth floor and cedar and open fires and people dancing in the wintertime. She was born right into that tradition. And so she carries a lot of good teachings. But she told me, you know, they used to just scoop the water right out of the stjana, the salt water. They would scoop it right out for cooking. They would cook their food right from that water. And they used cedar baskets in those days. A lot of times they wove watertight cedar baskets, and they would put hot rocks in them, and they would cook their food in there. But I don't know anybody today that goes to the salt water, that would scoop from that water and cook their food in it today. I don't know. I don't know if you know anybody, but I don't. So I think we have a lot of work to do, but we have to stay strong and positive, and we have to do it in a spiritual way. And we have to do it together. Each and every one of us is here for a reason. Not just here, but we came to this place, our Mother Earth. That's our belief, that we came here for a reason. And we can do this work together. So I'm happy to see everybody here. And I'm just going to go ahead and share maybe, I want to share a mermaid story because of our waters, you know, but maybe I'll share that later.
Okay, and the mermaid story is so beautiful, but I'm going to skip actually to another clip that is Chokaten talking a little bit more passionately. So this was a clip that from a Art Talks for Climate. So he's really talking about climate change in this particular talk. And it's just a small clip from this talk. And what I'm going to do after the different presentations is try to sort of summarize it. So it might not sound like you're getting the thing that you're seeking, perhaps, but you are. Because these elders, they talk in story and song and prayer. And so I'll do my best at the end to try to weave that in, and then we can go into the gems conversation from there.
And I don't have a choice to turn that off. I don't have a choice to look at this world and see the loneliness, see the emptiness, and see the lack of the life around us that in my ancestral DNA holds every memory of the most abundant place on earth, the Salis Sea. My DNA holds that, and it sees it out there as it should be. But it's not there. And worst of all, it's going away. Worst of all, it is going away. But sometimes I almost wish that I could place this burden on other people's hearts, that they could see the world through my indigenous, not eyes, but my indigenous spirit, my ancestral knowledge, wisdom, memory in my DNA. It's proven science. Everything that has ever happened to my family, to my people, it lives in my DNA. It vibrates there, and I must work with it. And so all of the things that ever happened to your family, to your people before you here on our lands, I hate to tell you, but it vibrates in your DNA too. And you have a choice. We all have a choice. Do we believe that we can move forward randomly? Can we heal from the greatest atrocity in all of history, right where we stand? randomly, without addressing, knowing what happened? Will it just randomly heal itself in ignorance? Or will we look at it and decide, I'm strong enough to heal this that vibrates in my body? Am I strong enough to look at that and say, yes, I will address it, I will heal it. I will no longer be part of an insane system, basically death. I don't come here to depress you. but you know, colonialism is not friendly. It's just not friendly to our people. It's not. It's really, really, really hard on our people. And our people know that all the other people are not separate from us. They're not separate from me or my people in any way, shape, or form. All of the things that patriarchy, colonization, and the lack of teachings, and the lack of elders, and the lack of elder women guiding society into life, and what we call colonialism, all of that, you know, every bit of that is something that just needs to be recognized and healed, and you know, and we need to come together around that and realize that we have a choice. We have a choice to be an educator. Do I choose to educate people? Do I choose to create a future for the children? And think about every action that I have, and does it bring a future for them? In every action that I have, is it from the center of my being, in a sacred place that would only create life, guided by elder women, guiding society into a direction of life? Will I create that world?
I mean, he just ends on, you know, a society of elder women guiding us into life, living from a space of sacred. I just had this one last really short clip, and it ends with a prayer and a drum. And it's specifically on how nature holds the balance, and that we are also all part of nature.
This teaching, prophecy teaching, was gifted to me from my dear cousin Johnny Moses. This is a Chiokten prophecy teaching from over 500 years ago. Chiokten had gathered the people to tell them of what he had received, his prophecy. And he told the people, he showed them the nature around them and said that this nature around us, see Seltsiem's garden, this that we live in, is all around us. And this garden that we live in, God's garden, we can translate it to, is so powerful and beautiful and strong for our people that this is keeping us in balance. He said that all of these elements of greed and hatred and jealousy, all of these elements that our human people struggle with, this beautiful nature is keeping all of these things in balance for our people. He said that we are truly blessed in this time. Right now, we are truly blessed because of this See Seltsiem's garden that is all around us, that is so ever present, that it is keeping us in balance, in this harmony for our people. And he said that someday that this garden that we live in, See Seltsiem's garden, would not be there for our people, and that we would struggle with this jealousy and anger and hatred and all of these things that were kept in balance by this beautiful, amazing force of nature that was so ever present for a people at that time. And I just give thanks for this teaching. There's one more thing I would like to include in this teaching also, that the elders, I had been gifted this teaching that elders, the grandmothers, would say that we are part of nature, so not to think that we have lost everything and that we will live in this world without, that has these elements, and to struggle always, but we can move beyond all of that with our prayers, because we are part of nature, that we can overcome these things, elements that nature kept in balance for us, because we are truly part of nature. That is what we believe. And we can keep that in balance with our prayers as we gather together as one. We can hold this balance for each other. And that is all.
Whew. Ashka, thank you. That's a lot. I have some distilled notes on how one might interpret some of that, but it's all in there. And so maybe I can just share it as we dialogue, as it comes forth in our conversation. If I was gonna kind of close with a bit of a close, though, it would be that, we are part of nature. We are nature. We have a role. We have a place. Each person has a place, and each person has a sacred purpose. And I'd love to throw in a little bit from my Auntie Hazel, who says, and we have work to do. So let's get to it. And with that, I'll hand it off.
Thank you so much, Miku. I know it took a lot of research for you to find all of those pieces and collect them for us, and you did a wonderful job with that. I want to mention what it is that caused me to really want to make sure that we had a representative from the Native American tradition in this consideration of our role as human beings on this earth. And that came from a seminar that I attended at the Institute of World Culture 15 or 20 years ago. And it was led by a woman from the Chumash tribe that is local to Santa Barbara, California. And having been around a lot of environmentally aware people, environmental activists, the dominant impression that I had been given was that if we would just somehow find a way to kind of shuffle off all the people of the earth, then everything would be great. Because that's really the problem, is the fact they're human beings. So get rid of the human beings and we have this perfect earth again. And she came with a really different perspective. She came in talking about John Muir. I think he was a Scotsman who was the first really of the white people to become acquainted with the beautiful Yosemite Valley and then make it known to the rest of the world. And when he arrived in Yosemite Valley and wanted to describe it to people, he described it as this beautiful garden, almost like the Garden of Eden, that had appeared on earth, and he got to enter into it and find himself in this pristine part of nature. that he wanted us to preserve, and thank goodness he did. He's responsible in part for the Sierra Club, for the establishment of the national park system in the United States, and generally a spirit of conservation of our resources. However, from the perspective of the native peoples, certainly of California, this was not a correct view that John Muir was putting forth. Why? Because it was someone's garden. It was some people's garden. In fact, it was a specific Indian tribe's garden, and this is where they lived. This is what they maintained. This is what the women would use their digging sticks to dig up the tubers that they would use to feed their families, but then they would leave behind the little tubers and they would spread them out. And by doing this spreading kind of action, they would cause these tubers to be even more abundant. This was a people who would let the rabbit population grow to a certain size, and then when it was becoming too large for the rest of the environment to survive with all their nibbling, voracious mouths and their tendency to reproduce, this people would create huge nets and manage to gather all those rabbits into the net and do a huge culling of the rabbit population for that time and use that to feed the people. And then also not let the rabbits nibble everything away in their garden of Yosemite Valley. And this was also a people who every autumn, before they needed to leave the valley for the because of the heavy snows that would be falling and would trap them there otherwise in the winter, would set controlled burns in the different places of the forest that had grown up so much of an understory that would become fuel for a much bigger and out of control fire. So they would do their own controlled burns in the forests of Yosemite to keep it the way that John Muir came and found that, oh, it's just God's garden that, just grew up by itself. No, there was a very close co-creation between nature and the human beings who lived in that valley, who allowed it to be the marvel that it was, and some degree still is. I mean, we can certainly appreciate Yosemite Valley to this day, and so that gave me such a different perspective on our place on Earth, we as human beings, than I had been acquainted with just talking to the modern day ecologists and environmentalists. I also came to know about the Ohlone people up in the Bay Area, and they would go to Tamales Bay, and there were a number of, I think both clams and oysters that they would harvest, and they would use the same kind of procedure that had been done in Yosemite Valley, also was being used by the Chumash people in their gathering in Santa Barbara area. And that was, they would harvest the largest of the oysters, and then they would take the keiki, the babies, and spread them out so that they would have a chance to flourish. Well, in came I believe it was called the Conservation Corps of the federal government, well-intentioned, with the mandate that no harvesting of those oysters was to be done whatsoever. And it didn't matter that they were native peoples, and this was part of how they fed their people. And it didn't matter that their way of doing things was actually better for the oyster population. There was a mandate that they must not harvest. Well, as a result of that mandate, in addition to overfishing that had been done there by the non-native peoples of the area. But it was very key that the native peoples were not allowed to harvest the way that they traditionally would have. 3 of those oyster varieties went extinct. So it just served to show me that when a people truly understands the balance of life in the area that they live, they can serve to actually enhance the way that nature itself is progressing. And I believe there have been studies done in Yellowstone about returning the large predators to the land and so on, and being able to restore it that way. So I just wanted to bring up some of those ideas for consideration in our discussion of what our role really is. Is it better if we just all got on a bunch of spaceships and, sailed somewhere else in the solar system or in the galaxy, left Earth here all by itself? Or is there something that we really could and should be doing that would ultimately enhance nature? Do we have a place here? So that's what I'm putting out on the table. And, in addition to the beautiful things that Miku has shared with us.
That brings to mind, Renee, kind of the concept of colonialism, and that it's not all evil in itself, or it didn't have to be, but the idea of coming to a place and then disregarding being educated about the land and the natural art environment, and inflicting one's own wishes for return without the consideration of environment. That in itself is the evil, basically. And without that taken away, bringing it back to the people who do understand, or if the people who came would have allowed, or now the people who are here allow themselves to be re-educated, then yeah, I believe we don't have to take a spaceship and get away for this planet to survive and even heal, that we really do have the answers. But it's this colonial ideal or idea, or what has become of that, and how that's spread in our education and how we approach life, that there's a healing, there's a re-educating that I think there's more awareness on. Yeah, so thank you.
Maurice?
Yeah, I was raised in Los Angeles and learned to read in a car as we were going to my grandmother's and racing around on freeways and cruising down Van Nuys Boulevard as a kid. And all of that didn't have anything to do with soil, people, land. And it's kind of like fast times at Dorsey High School or something. And the point I'm really trying to make is, if people really slow down and relax and don't think their survival and security is always at stake with their ego or their personality, but if they can kind of let go and just go with it, go with the gentle breezes, whether it's in Hawaii, which I always experience when I'm there, I might add, or as the voice of the silence says, the gentle breezes of soul wisdom that all of a sudden wash away all that stuff. And you find yourself much more peaceful and much more open, a lot less colonizing in attitude, being more open to listening and open to learning. It's kind of like this slow food, slow down, and begin to smell the roses and appreciate.
That's perfect. I think you got it. So that's, thank you for that almost segue. I kind of was trying to distill down some pieces, some gems from the gems. So many people raised with maybe what you would say a Western mind, or some people say a colonized mind, not a wild mind any longer. We or those people or us, are looking for solutions to the problem so that we can fix it. And that they should be prescriptive, or maybe like recipes or steps that we can follow. And I think it's helpful to remember that there's waves of different kinds of solutions. There are important short-term things that do need to be happening. But in most of the teachings that I've experienced, the solution is really what you just shared. It is to slow down and actually come into relationship with the world around us. It's a complete paradigm shift, complete change in the way that we think about the world and live and move. I had some specific notes from Chiokaten's talk. One of them from various talks, wake up in the morning and pray, that actually prayer is part of this, that visualization is part of this, that educating ourselves, that he calls for people to become elders, actually, and that we've lost our elders, and that we need to learn how to become wise. Every one of us, no matter how old we are. There's no more time. It's the time now for us all to find a way to become wise, to begin to remember how we once lived in balance with nature, in connection with all beings. He said, every action that I take coming from a sacred place, coming from the center of my being, at the center of life. What would it mean that every action that we take, we could do that? I have another auntie I work with that works more with people. It's hard to learn these things through story and song and prayer, but that's the way they were always learned. And people had lifetimes to learn through story and song and prayer. And now it is helpful to try to translate a little. Auntie Hazel says to, one, if we were going to have like steps, learn the story of the people of the place where you are right now. Learn the story of the colonization of the people of the place where you are right now. Learn the story of the genocide of the people of the place where you are right now. Learn the place and find where your role is in that place. Then it would be to learn the story of the place of the people where you're from. Where is that place? What are the stories of that place and that land that you're holding in your body and your DNA? And then what is the role of your ancestors as they may or may not connect with the place where you are? It sounds complicated, but it's really actually very important to keep us grounded. And then through those learning, that's the beginning. So if there was like steps, really it's that simple. Learn the story of the place where you are. Learn the story of the place where you're from. Learn the language of the place where you are, because the language holds the keys to the ways of thinking for how to be in relationship with a place. And I thought of one more really simple thing today, which relates to slow down. If I was going to say one thing you could do maybe once a week, it's called in environmental education, it's called a sit spot. Find a place in nature and sit there. I know that sounds very simple because it is very simple. And begin to come into relationship and listen and be still and make that a practice. So those are some of the things that are kind of tangible that you could do right away. Learning to learn from the story and the song and the poetry and the memory. And in Hawaii, we're so lucky that we have amazing teachers and elders right here who are still holding that.
I really like your last 5 minutes because it really hit the message. And I'm a little sad because I grew up in Hawaii and watch generational, like 3 generations coming together for dinner every single Sunday. And I really miss that. And what has displaced our Hawaiian, personally to me, our local culture is you've got when you say, by the way, when you say elders, do you mean people in their 60s? Because the 60-year-olds don't act like elders today. I mean, when I think of elders, I think of anybody over age 73 or 75. And what I wanted to say was that so much of our so-called elders are in care homes and nursing homes or assisted living homes. They're living all in cubicles, being cared for by strangers. And whereas they could have been continued to live in a generational situation like I've seen on farmlands growing up in Hawaii, and where you have 3 generations living together, all sitting and having wonderful dinners and playing together, the grandchildren, the grand aunts, the grand all that. And I don't see that happening in Hawaii today. In fact, what I see more is more rapid decline and more cases of Alzheimer and dementia, and a lot of depression in our society because we seem so isolated from the continual dialogue and interaction between 3 intergenerational families.
It sounds to me as if there's such a close relationship between human beings and nature that when we disrespect nature, that's a disrespect for life itself. And so we're probably more likely to disrespect and fail to give the love and care that we need to our fellow human beings, even in our own families sometimes. So it's an important connection I think you're making there, Anne. Thank you. Cliff, did you want to add something from the almanac?
Well, I don't know, did you read this quote from Joseph Campbell earlier?
Yeah.
It just seems like this quote is very much in keeping with your talk today. It's with the theme of our role as human beings on the earth. Joseph Campbell says, "The goal of life is to make your heartbeat match the beat of the universe, to match your nature with nature." And this idea of finding a place in nature to sit and try and do that, it just seems very challenging and very practical at the same time. But as I was driving to work today, I started to think, I guess as I become closer to being an elder, I'm starting to become more aware that we have different centers of consciousness in our being. And we mostly in the West, we think of most of our consciousness being from the neck up. But I'm starting to become more aware that there is definitely consciousness around the heart center. I'm very much aware of that now. And as well as I think the Hawaiians said around the navel, there's a sense of consciousness there as well. And there's all these different possible realms of consciousness. But I was thinking that it might be possible to ask ourselves at the end of any given day, what percentage of the day was spent in what realm of consciousness? In other words, was I 90% in my head and only 10% in my heart, or the other way around, which I think would be the best. But this whole idea of our heart being in rhythm with the heart of nature seems very much in keeping with what your talk was about.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. The sit spot is an easy way to start practicing that. I'm really interested in, if anyone has ever had the chance to do, okay, so I'm really interested in forest bathing, because forest bathing feels like a really great way to help people begin to start remembering how to connect with the forest and nature, even if they don't know how. But then for some of our elders who are not able to get out to the woods anymore, or things like people who don't even with lockdown and not having access, that maybe there are virtual ways to connect to nature, even if, you know, if that's part of the solution, more nature somehow, whether it's through a video of a river running and just hearing the sound of the river running, or a virtual forest walk with Phyllis. You know, it's just keeping that continuous inviting to remember, and that some part of you has it. And the more time you get in nature, the more your body begins to remap. It really does help to go with an elder, but there are elders here. And elders, Marianne, I was thinking of as I wrote, people of memory, people who still know how to be in relationship with the land, that are still carrying the stories in their bodies because they received that. And then there's also wisdom keepers for the younger ones who are not elders by age, but are still holding that wisdom because we need to become wise.
It's so interesting that the path that you are suggesting to help restore and rebalance nature is very much an inward path. I'm not hearing you talk about, you know, making sure that you recycle every bottle and newspaper. Yes, those are of course important. And yet that's not what you're pointing to from a native perspective. It's much more an inner attunement to the nature around us. And I wonder too if it would help to somehow realize that really and truly everything is part of nature. And so if we are, you know, even if we're sitting in our homes, there are elements of nature which make up our homes. There are elements of nature that make up the chairs that we're sitting on and the tables that we're eating at, you know, the paper that we may be writing on, and just this idea of living matter. And so that sitting in a spot could be sitting on a piece of fabric. And if we were so lucky, maybe somebody sewed it for us. So they invested it with their love. And the fabric itself was made up of cotton that human beings had grown and picked and somehow woven together, for example. And we could connect with nature just at a very small and very potent level, with a greater recognition of just these little life atoms or stardust that everything here on Earth is composed of. Recognizing our connections those ways. Diana.
Yeah, for me, I think that's why meditation is so important, because every morning or twice a day, you can sit and connect with the oneness of all that is. And if that tree is me and this cupboard is me, then I'm going to treat it with love and respect. And as long as I know that place in myself, my now, my core, that I'm feeling connected with the oneness, and that can be through prayer, surrendering to God's will. It can be through oneness of feeling the divine love in everything, and then living from that place of divine wisdom and divine purpose. And if that, even in the cup that you pick up, I mean, that cup is me. Can I treat it with respect and love? And then it goes out to people and to the world. And if we do, for me, if I do my part of taking care of those things around me, I can do other things, but I think that is an important part of it. And it's bringing myself back to remembering the oneness that all that is. And whatever that form that takes, whether it be prayer, meditation, just to remember we are all one in divine love. And that's, if we live from that place, then we in fact will be able to take care of the world in a different way.
Those are all really beautiful and helpful thoughts and suggestions. I appreciate being part of this meeting today. I just wanted to throw in another perspective that has been passing through my mind, that it seems like as a globe, and certainly Western culture, parts of Eastern culture, we're really at a crisis point in many ways in relation to the natural environment, where we really have to make substantial changes in the way we live, not just in the way we think and feel towards nature, but in the way we actually live on a day-to-day basis. And and often when you hear talks on environmentalism, you know, the problem is out there. It's with the you know, the government and corporate culture and the emphasis on growth and monetary growth, economic growth, as opposed to being stewards and caretakers. But and that's certainly valid, and it seems like, you know, we all should give consideration to policies, movements, and activism of various sorts that would help to move those larger forces towards a more environmental perspective. But it also seems like that puts our power outside of ourselves, that the world can only change if corporations change, if governments change, and that that really perhaps one very valid perspective would be to think about, you know, what are the 5 things that I can do, the five changes I can make in my daily life that are going to substantially demonstrate my increased moral sensitivity and awareness of my impact on the environment. And, you know, just a few things, obvious things we probably have all thought about. Our diet is one. In fact, there's many books have been written now about how, you know, environmental degradation, species extinction, even this whole new era of zoonotic illnesses has to do with the misuse of animal livestock, fish livestock, commodification, industrialization of the meat and dairy industries. So diet, you know, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It seems like, you know, that's a place we can make a real substantial change on a daily basis, and that's going to have a global impact. And then clothing, of course, is another one. Transportation, you know, there's certainly ways that we could, all of us, make changes in our choices of how we get from place to place. Is there another alternative besides taking the car? Do we always have to start up the carbon-based automobile to get there? Is there another way? And then finally, as I know we've gone over time now here, so your Miku, your comment about planting, I think it was a reference to seeding forest, but we all have gardens, right? Is there something that we could plant in our garden and take care of and nourish that's going to start the cycle that we're told we need to start, which is that of restoring carbon to the atmosphere, the healthy, or not carbon, rather, the breathing that plant life does to cleanse and nourish the air, restore the air. All of us can plant something and nourish it and guard it. So anyway, just a few thoughts about taking substantial steps in our daily lives, changes that we can make rather than waiting for the government to change.
Good idea.
Aho.
I like to ask at the close if there's someone who feels inspired to give a vote of thanks to our speaker. Oh, Sharon, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Aloha no ko manao olelo o Hawaii kako. Thank you very much, Nico, for your knowledge that you shared. And Hawaii was colonized, like you mentioned. And like you, I believe, like what you shared with us, there's more important than just environment. And it was shared by Pono Shim that there is such a thing as aloha. And we could show the rest of the world, Hawaii, by the kahi, this grace, leave people as they are. Lukahi, unbroken, connected. Olu olu, be gentle. Ha ha ha, emptiness. ahanui, waiting for the right moment, patience, listening. And I think that, Nico, you have brought up greatly, and the American Indian tradition is quite similar to the Hawaiian tradition because they're both indigenous. And they both face the same things that you mentioned, and all the things that that was shown us in the video was also things that are said here in Hawaii. Absolutely everything. And our environment can be helped, but there are important things because the world has placed all our things on artificial intelligence, informational technology, Airbnb, things of that sort. But there's more important things, like you mentioned, that we need to go back to. So I'm really thankful. Mahalo nui loa piha.
As a final thing, if we could ask one more thing of you, Miku, could you pull that flute back out and close us off with a flute song that you learned from Chokoten, perhaps? At least this form of music you learned from him.
Yes, I'd be happy to.
Thank you. Mahalo.